Emily was only 5 years old, but that late afternoon, she seemed to carry the weight of the world on her bare feet. The sky above the city was turning orange and gray as she ran across the cracked sidewalk in front of a gas station. "The billionaire is hurting my mom," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks and her hair clinging to her sweaty face. At the gas station entrance, 3 large men in leather vests all turned at once. Jake Ramirez, leader of the biker crew known as the West Crows, stepped forward. He didn't know the girl's name or where she came from, but one look into her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Without hesitation, Jake knelt down. Hey, where's your mom?" Emily pointed to the nearby high-rise. "Up there. He's hurting her right now." Jake stood up fast, nodded to 2 of his brothers, and simply said, "Let's go." Now. While 2 bikers stayed behind with Emily, the others revved their engines. Jake gripped the handlebars tight, jaw clenched. He didn't know who the billionaire was, but he knew the type of man who used power to crush people. At the top floor of the Hailstone Tower, Sarah was finishing mopping the last stretch of marble floor with her worn-out hands. Her janitor uniform was soaked in sweat and cleaning chemicals. Emily had stayed with her all day. There was no other option. Richard Hale, the building owner and darling of business magazines, showed up unannounced. He reeked of expensive whiskey and was surrounded by investors. "You make me look bad in front of important people, Sarah," he said, kicking over the bucket. She tried to apologize, tried to stay professional, but he didn't let her. "Who do you think you are?" "I own all this, including you." When he shoved her against the wall, Emily let out a scream and ran. Sarah tried to follow, but Hale grabbed her arm tightly. The guests watched, but no one intervened. The silence in that luxurious room was deafening. Sarah screamed, not from pain, but from fear of what would happen if no one listened. Jake and the 2 bikers arrived at the building's front desk. The security guard hesitated, but Jake's expression wasn't asking for permission. It was a warning. "The girl says her mom's being hurt upstairs." "We're going up." They didn't wait. They charged up 3 flights of stairs, unsure of what they'd find. When they reached the top floor, a muffled scream echoed. Jake slammed his shoulder into the door. Richard Hale had his back turned, gripping Sarah's arm. He turned furious when he saw Jake. "Who the hell are you? Get out of here, now!" Jake didn't answer. He walked forward until he was between Hale and Sarah. "She's not alone anymore." The room went cold. Hale tried to keep control, but it was already too late. Sirens wailed outside. Someone had finally called the police. Richard Hale was escorted down by 2 officers. His perfectly styled hair was now a mess, his face red with rage and humiliation. Sarah descended slowly, supported by Jake, still shaking. Emily ran to her and hugged her tightly, like she was trying to fuse their hearts back together. "Mommy?" "I got help!" "They came!" Sarah cried silently, eyes full of relief. An officer asked questions, took statements. The security footage confirmed everything. Witnesses, once silent, now spoke up. Richard was handcuffed. The billionaire who thought he was untouchable was now just a man surrounded by truths money couldn't silence. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt like her life was truly her own. In the days that followed, the West Crows did more than just stop a crime. They became a constant presence. Jake brought breakfast to Sarah and Emily at the shelter. He connected her with a women's advocacy network. A biker friend, now a lawyer, offered to represent Sarah pro bono. But more importantly, Emily smiled again. She drew with crayons on the wall. She drew Jake, Sarah, the other bikers. One of them even became a cartoon character in her sketches. "They're our new family, Mommy," Sarah smiled. There was no greater wealth than that. And there, between chrome exhaust pipes and healing hearts, a new story began. One where fear had no home, and where leather-clad angels protected a little girl in a green dress. Because sometimes, angels wear tattoos, beards, and ride Harleys. The news of what happened at the Hailstone Tower spread quickly. Local papers picked up the story, followed by regional networks. "Biker gang saves janitor from abusive billionaire," read one headline. But Jake hated that word, gang. They weren't a gang. They were a brotherhood, a family. And now Sarah and Emily were part of it. Reporters came knocking. Some wanted sensationalism, others genuinely wanted to help. Jake kept the spotlight away from Emily and Sarah as much as possible. "They're not a story. They're people," he told one persistent journalist. Sarah was overwhelmed but deeply grateful. With the legal help provided by the Crows Network, she filed charges against Hale and launched a civil suit. The case became a lightning rod for conversations about power, silence, and who gets to be believed in this world. Jake sat with Sarah during every court date, not to protect her, but to stand beside her, to witness her courage. And every time Emily reached for his hand, he felt something in himself soften. Something he hadn't felt in a long time, and he knew then. This wasn't about what happened. It was about what they'd do next. After the dust settled, Jake and the West Crows partnered with local advocates to launch a new initiative, Project Second Sunrise. Its mission was to provide emergency shelter, emotional support, and job placement for women and children fleeing abusive environments. Sarah, once the janitor silenced by power, now stood at the front of meetings, telling her story with quiet force. Emily sat drawing in the corner of every session, now nicknamed the Little Light by everyone who met her. The group repurposed an old auto shop into a safe haven. What was once a place for oil changes and tire replacements now had a daycare, a counseling room, and a small cafe run by women from the program. People started donating. Not just money, but time, food, clothes, skills. One mechanic volunteered to teach maintenance classes to survivors. A retired teacher offered literacy support, and Jake showed up every day, with coffee in one hand and a toolkit in the other. Because healing, he learned, wasn't about big gestures. It was about showing up again and again. Months passed. The trial of Richard Hale became a public spectacle. His legal team tried everything, smearing Sarah's name, questioning her parenting, even suggesting the Crows had coerced the entire situation. But the truth had weight: security footage, witnesses, medical records, and most damning, the complete lack of remorse from Hale himself, Sarah testified. Her voice trembled at first, but with Jake in the back row and Emily watching from the hallway, she found strength. He thought I was invisible, but not anymore. It wasn't just a statement, it was a declaration, one that would ripple far beyond the courtroom. The verdict: guilty. Multiple counts: assault, intimidation, abuse of power. When the sentence was read, Sarah didn't cheer. She exhaled, and as she walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hit her face like it hadn't in years. Jake waited by the steps. "Told you. You're stronger than him," she smiled. "I know." Months passed. The trial of Richard Hale became a public spectacle. His legal team tried everything, smearing Sarah's name, questioning her parenting, even suggesting the Crows had coerced the entire situation. But the truth had weight: security footage, witnesses, medical records, and most damning, the complete lack of remorse from Hale himself, Sarah testified. Her voice trembled at first, but with Jake in the back row and Emily watching from the hallway, she found strength. "He thought I was invisible, but not anymore." It wasn't just a statement, it was a declaration, one that would ripple far beyond the courtroom. The verdict: guilty. Multiple counts: assault, intimidation, abuse of power. When the sentence was read, Sarah didn't cheer. She exhaled, and as she walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hit her face like it hadn't in years. Jake waited by the steps. "Told you. You're stronger than him," she smiled. "I know." Emily was thriving. Her drawings, once just escape, were now becoming her voice. At 7, she began winning local art contests. One of her paintings, a biker holding hands with a little girl under a tree, was displayed in City Hall. Sarah framed a copy of it and hung it in the new kitchen of their small apartment, just down the block from the Project Second Sunrise Center. Life wasn't easy, but it was honest, real, and safe. Jake picked Emily up from school some days. She'd jump on his back like he was a horse, laughing, yelling, "Go, go, biker man!" At night, Sarah would sit with her daughter, combing her hair and whispering, "You saved me, you know that?" Emily never answered with words. She didn't have to. Her smile said everything. The West Crows, once a small local crew, had grown into something greater. More than bikers, they became protectors, mentors, and advocates. Other chapters formed. Jake mentored new leaders. The name changed too, from West Crows to Iron Shelter. They began working alongside local police, organizing safe rides for women in danger, teaching self-defense, even hosting free mechanical workshops for teenage boys and girls. Some in the biker world mocked them, called them soft. But Jake didn't care. The world had enough tough guys. What it needed were strong men who used their strength to lift others. And every time he walked past Emily's painting on the wall of the community center, he was reminded why they started. 5 years passed. Emily, now 10, stood on a small stage during a Project Second Sunrise fundraiser. She wore a simple dress and held a microphone with both hands. Her voice was soft, but steady. When I was little, I thought heroes wore capes. But I learned they ride motorcycles, wear leather, and listen when little girls scream. The room fell silent. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. Jake wiped his beard and looked down, overwhelmed. That moment was the story completed. The beginning had been chaos. But now, this was peace, and peace, Jake thought, was the loudest kind of victory. Years later, Emily would become an artist. Her first graphic novel, titled Angels in Leather, would be based on that night, the night she ran barefoot into the arms of those who didn't turn away. The book became a bestseller, used in schools across the country to teach empathy, bystander action, and resilience. Sarah continued her work as an advocate, eventually becoming director of Project Second Sunrise. Jake, he retired from leadership but never missed a community ride. He remained the quiet giant in the back of every meeting, holding his coffee and watching the light grow. And whenever someone asked Emily how she survived, she would smile and say, "Because someone listened." That was the legacy, not just of a mother and daughter, but of those who chose to stand, to ride, and to love louder than fear. The end.